Joining us now, Senator Jill Vogel, Republican Senator from Shenandoah Valley. Senator Vogel, great to have you.
Good morning. It's great to be with you.
Okay, so minimum wage bill gets out of the Senate committee the other day, 6-4. Got Republicans backing that. What's your position on the minimum wage bill?
I am not for increasing the minimum wage, and that bill was reported out of committee and will come to the Senate floor in about 2.5 hours or so, and I expect that to be a very heated debate. But I can tell you, on balance, the harm to the Commonwealth and the harm to low-income workers in Virginia will be far greater than if we increase the minimum wage to what the proposal now says is $15. It'll be very, very detrimental.
Are you going to be able to defeat it?
I believe we will.
Who are the two Republicans that voted in favor of it coming out of committee?
I think it was Normant and one other person. I feel very confident that on the Senate floor we would have the votes to defeat it. And, you know, I've been on the show before, and we've talked about things that don't matter and things that do matter.
Yes.
And this actually really matters. And
yes.
It matters to businesses around the Commonwealth of Virginia. And actually it matters probably most of all to our low-income workers who will lose their jobs. And this bill takes it to $15, but the research that I have seen from the Congressional Budget Office indicates that raising it just to 10 would cost us somewhere around 30,000 jobs in the Commonwealth. So imagine what happens when you take it to $15. And if you consider that also the research that I've looked at indicates that about 19% only of that increase in the minimum wage would actually go to low-income families. And so if that's the rationale for passing it, there are so many other things that we can do that are better that don't have such a disproportionate negative effect both on small businesses and on entry-level workers who rely on those minimum wage jobs that are $7.25 an hour and more in businesses where the major distinction between keeping somebody and not keeping somebody is that very thin margin where the payroll cost is all their cost.
So I think Tommy Norman said, I believe I read this saying that he voted for it because he thought it should have a full hearing on the floor, which you're having today in the well, right? A full
right.
hearing, a full
That's
full
exactly
debate.
right. And I feel very confident that Senator Norman on the floor would not support it. He has not supported it in the past, and I think as the caucus leader and somebody who's very dialed into what matters to businesses and what matters to the workforce, what matters for economic development, what matters for Virginia's ranking in terms of best place to do business, that he for sure will not be in favor of raising the minimum wage.
Jill Vogel, Virginia has had a very, very long history of right to work, right? Very long history of it. And a lot of people have said that that is one of the reasons why Virginia has always been looked at as business friendly and has had vibrant companies coming in. Even when the economy was down, we always got businesses coming in and got highly rated. There's a real movement now, especially in the House, with some of the more liberal members, to strip the state of that, to strip the Commonwealth of right to work. Is that coming before the Senate? How will that wind its way through the sausage-making process?
Well, every year there are at least 1 or 2 or 3 measures introduced to repeal our right-to-work law in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And, again, you have to consider that businesses, small businesses, big businesses, they're all rational economic actors. So what happens when you do something that damages the ability of people to have a flexible workforce, have the workforce they want, and have those entry-level jobs? Things like repealing right to work and raising the minimum wage are devastating. And, again, rational economic actors will make that decision and say, well, I can go to other states where it's far better, where it has the friendly business climate that Virginia used to have, and they can go to states like North Carolina or Tennessee or Georgia, especially in the case of minimum wage. So I feel confident that the Republican majorities in both the House and the Senate will not allow us to roll back our right-to-work laws. This is something that's come up every single year that I've been in the Senate, and every year we've defeated it. We have, again, that razor-thin margin now of 1 vote in both the House and the Senate, and if and when we should lose those, then it's a whole game changer. You ask when it's coming up. I'm not certain what the status is or whether it got out of committee, but I can tell you that I, for one, along with everybody who is engaged with the business community and with our workforce that's very engaged, would 100% oppose repealing our right-to-work laws.
Yeah, I would think that in order for that to be repealed, there would have to be a significant majority by the Democrats in both houses, because there's Democrats also that understand if they repeal that it's really going to hurt future business expansion in Virginia. So I don't think it's got any legs at all in this session. Jill, I agree with you on that. We're with Jill Vogel, Republican state senator from the Shenandoah Valley. Senator Vogel, let's get to Interstate 81, which runs through your district. So yesterday, I'm very excited about Interstate 64, 95. I live, as you know, in Virginia Beach. So going from Virginia Beach to Washington, every week I get to ride the roads, 64, and I get to participate in the improvements that have been made. So it's very exciting.
You.
I know, right? So I'm getting the benefit. I was for the transportation, Bob McDonnell, great tax increase, whatever you want to call it. And now I'm seeing and feeling the results of that. And after this is all extended, it's going to take an hour off my drive, 1 hour. Now it's about a half hour.
Wow.
Yeah, it's real. Now, yesterday or Friday afternoon, I took my son, Joseph, to Radford University, and Ann met us in Richmond. So then I took 64 to 81, 81 to Radford through Roanoke, right? 81's got some real issues. I mean, my goodness. I mean, I would hate to drive that thing.
On the roads that have now, the newly improved roads that are going to save you an hour in your drive. And then you come over to the valley, where we are desperate to have some of those road improvements to the major artery. I mean, it's a major north-south artery, but when I come off of 66 and hit 81, I mean, it is astounding. It's almost like hitting a wall. Mm-hmm. And God forbid that there would be rain or snow or any kind of small traffic accident, because 81 is frequently blocked, and those trips back and forth to Radford or Virginia Tech or any of the places that I go where I take 81, it also goes right through the valley where I live, it's terrible. And for years, people have been begging, please let us have resources to improve Interstate 81. And because it's a very competitive environment, and because of the way the ranking works, guess what? Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads went out. And so we have been waiting and waiting and waiting our turn. And I think now the business community, the people who live in the valley have said, look, we'll do anything. We're not going to wait for something that is an allocation of resources for the 81 corridor. We are prepared to do whatever it takes for us to work out something regionally so that we can get the money and start immediately, because we're already at least 15 years or 20 years behind in terms of making those improvements. And there's so much truck traffic that if you're just a regular motorist, I mean, there's hardly any space for you. So that's the issue.
So there's a movement underfoot in the General Assembly to toll it in order to get the money to expand 81. There's no doubt it's got to be expanded. I mean, if you're not accustomed to driving it like me, and you drive it on a Friday night going from Richmond to, we went to Radford. I mean, it's just a nightmare.
You can't drive.
You can't drive it. I mean, it is, and it's dangerous. It took us 2 more hours to get there than it did to get home on Sunday afternoon. So my question is, tolls or no tolls, and why or why not?
Well, what's interesting is that people historically who are very opposed to tolls in the valley and in the region where I represent have finally rolled over and said, uncle, and said, we support some kind of a tolling process where we can generate revenue that's specific to 81. I think that's everybody's concern, is that if we do something waiting for transportation resources, they won't come to us, and that is 100% historically been the case. So I'm surprised and frankly impressed that so many people in the region have come together. They worked on this through the work group. Senator Obenshain and I introduced the bill that actually sort of catapulted this to the study level, where we had all this input from stakeholders around the region, and they have all consistently come to a consensus on this, that the tolling is their preferred option. And they have been very careful to craft a plan that would allow regular motorists the option to pay $30 for a year, and you'd be able to drive on 81. And then the idea is that the people who use it, the freight, the folks who are, driving through, that they pay that toll, and that's how we get the revenue. The alternative has been, have a regional tax or do something locally. But the problem is that means that the local community bears 100% of the burden for interstate traffic. So while I have historically not been a fan of tolls and have, worked hard to try to come up with other options when we've had, toll bills come up that affect Northern Virginia, only because my folks were so opposed, this is different. And I am rather impressed by the numbers of people who are, coming to the legislature, not asking but begging us to pass this.
So one of these proposals is that 81 is told in order to raise the money, put it in a Al Gore type lockbox, if you will, a lockbox,
right,
in order to get it just for 81. And then, but you could have the option as a motorist, as a driver that lives in Virginia along the route, you could have the option of spending maybe $30, $35 annually. You get a little sticker card thing on your Easy Pass. That gets you through, but then the non-Virginia commercial traffic has to pay the tolls.
Right, and I think that's a fair way to allocate the burden of generating those resources, which is to, apply it to those who are using that highway. And the majority of those people are not people who live right there in Edinburgh or Mount Jackson or Woodstock or Harrisonburg or Winchester along 81. Those are not necessarily the people who are, using 81 the most and, frankly, causing the most, degradation to the bridges and the roads. And actually, it's just, I think, in my view, really, really important that the community locally not bear the disproportionate burden of all those improvements.
So, Senator Vogel,
users should pay.
So why not just do what, say, North Carolina did, which is just impose a gasoline tax? That way everybody pays for it all over the state, as well as truckers or commercial vehicles. They drive through Virginia, they have to stop and buy gas, or they buy diesel. Just tax that, then you get more money faster, and it's a couple of cents, and that's the end of it. Why not do that?
You would never ask, because that is obviously the alternative, or one of the best alternatives that people have proposed. But here's the issue, and why people in my region are opposed to that, and that is they don't believe that an increase in the gas tax to put general revenue into transportation will allow them the confidence to know that those improvements, that those resources will come to Interstate 81. They have believed that in the past when that's happened, that transportation is considered broadly, and the definition is broad, so it can go to bike paths and other kinds of transportation in that region. And these folks are extremely concerned that it will go for anything other than Interstate 81. Which is why I think the consensus has really been to go with this route, the tolling route, where you're really effectively tolling the people who are coming in and out of Virginia, non-Virginians, and easing the burden on local people in the community by letting them pay $30 or $35 for that annual pass, and then you've got it locked in. It's an 81 improvement, not a statewide tax increase or a local tax increase that goes to the region and may not actually go where it's supposed to go.
Well, Senator, though, couldn't you legislate that in? Like, so, because there's going to be, pick a number, a 2% gas tax, but that has to go just to 81. Could you not legislate that in? Because there is an argument to say, look, everybody should be paying for that, because I just drove on 81 this weekend, right?
Right.
If it was just, right. If it was a toll, I guess I'd have been paying that, right? Because I probably wouldn't spend the $30.
Right.
But if you just tax all gas, you're going to accelerate the project, right, by a very long time or short time, whatever the word may be.
And possibly not. And I think the concern is that there's no guarantee that once you pass the tax increase that there won't be some change in the allocation. It's very difficult to get it allocated to one specific project. And it's interesting because I am surprised by the outcome of the the businesses, the work group that considered every alternative and came forward with a recommendation. I'm surprised, but I'm also impressed by how thoroughly they thought through this and how much consensus there is. I've had a handful of people reach out to say that they're vehemently opposed, and I can understand, and certainly there are options to make tweaks as we move forward. But I am really impressed that people decided, nope, we don't want the gas tax, this is what we want. And I want to defer to the folks in my business community, the people who've been engaged in this conversation for such a long time, and to the folks who've worked on this proposal for, more than a year.
Well, all I can say is one way or the other, I think this should be done, seeing the benefits of it from Southeast Virginia. And, of course, we had the same complaint here when I first moved here from Atlanta, Georgia. Senator Vogel, many of the people in Hampton Roads had the same complaint that you're having now, which is where all the transportation money goes to Northern Virginia because the Northern Virginia caucus is very powerful, led by Peterson, Saslaw, and others, and they always get what they want. Nobody else gets anything, right?
Right. You hear that giant sucking sound they used to always refer to, and that's all the money being sucked into Northern Virginia. And what has been a challenge for regions like mine is that once we passed the transportation bill, and then we had the accompanying legislation which is in effect a ranking system, which is smart and wise, but it allocates all the transportation resources to the places that are most congested and most clogged and most need them, which is great. Mm-hmm. But that smart scale doesn't account for something like Interstate 81 that is so critical for economic expansion. It's critical to local small businesses. It's critical to the port of Virginia, which is right there. And unfortunately, because it's a more rural part of the state, it doesn't factor in and get the same amount of attention or resources that smart scale allocates to others. So that's why we've had to come back. And I got news for you. If I go home and we haven't done something for Interstate 81, I probably just won't go home. Because at this point, people are so frustrated. And the business community has been frustrated for years, but now it's become a safety issue too. Every time there's an accident, I have sheriffs who send me a note and say, just happened on 81. Here it is. It's a fatality. This could be avoided. You guys have to fix this. And so it's now, it's gone well beyond impacting local businesses and being an inconvenience for people who are stuck. It's become a public safety issue, too.
You're going to be the lightning rod to get the money for 81, just like Frank Wagner, who is a state senator in Virginia Beach and a very good friend of mine, and I'm a big supporter of Wagner's. Wagner was the guy that got the money for Southeast Virginia. Joe Vogel, you're going to be the one, right, to get the money for 81?
I don't know that I can take the credit for that exclusively because we have a lot of people in the region.
Somebody's got to take the mantle.
Who have worked incredibly hard.
I know that's
and who participated in those public hearings and who've been, facilitating getting to some kind of consensus. And that was really the critical part for me is I want a consensus in the community that I represent. I'm looking for the people who are, who have the biggest stake in the game to be engaged and help guide this. And I have heard from all of them.
Oh, you're such a team
phone
player.
Call and emails to say, please, accept this. And then everybody has a different rationale for why this is the right solution. And so I'm impressed by that. We don't often get consensus that way.
All right, well, look,
so I can take a little bit of credit, but certainly Senator Obenchain and others who've worked really hard on this deserve, a lot more credit.
I'm very impressed with your ability to spread the love and not take credit, but you need to Frank Wagnerize 81. See, Wagner got the money for Southeast Virginia, and yes, he said the same thing about his team, but it was you need to Wagnerize it.